Ladies and gentlemen, when life's burdens feel too heavy to carry, when worry clouds your every step, remember this truth. God's angels are always near, guiding, protecting, and comforting us. We may not always see them with our eyes, but their presence is undeniable. In moments of uncertainty, we can trust that God, in His infinite wisdom, has sent His angels to watch over us. As Billy Graham once said, "Rest in His hands, stop worrying, and trust God." This message is not just a call for us to surrender our fears, but a reminder of the divine signs around us that point to His loving care. Today, I want to share with you 8 divine signs that angels are near, symbols of God's presence that can bring peace to our hearts and strength to our spirits. Let go of the worry and open your heart to the peace that comes when you rest in His hands. Does this introduction capture the tone and message you're aiming for? At times, we may find ourselves facing situations where the weight of the world seems to fall on our shoulders, and the path ahead feels uncertain. It is in these moments that God's divine protection often manifests in ways that we might not fully comprehend at first. The unexpected protection that we experience can be a sign that angels are near, watching over us, guiding us, and keeping us safe from harm in ways beyond. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where something dangerous could have happened, but by some miracle you were spared? Perhaps you were in a car accident, and though the circumstances were dire, you walked away without injury. Or maybe you were going through a challenging time, feeling like everything was falling apart. And just when you thought you couldn't go any further, a sudden opportunity or person appeared, bringing you the help you needed. These are not just coincidences. They are signs of divine protection, subtle glimpses of God's angels at work. It's easy to dismiss these events as mere chance or to chalk them up to luck. But if we open our eyes to the possibility that angels are truly among us, we begin to see God's hand at work in a deeper way. God's protection is not always loud and obvious. Sometimes it comes in the form of a quiet whisper, a prompt to take a different route or avoid a particular situation. Other times it may come through the actions of another person, someone who steps in at just the right moment, offering help or guidance when you least expect it. One of the most powerful forms of unexpected protection is the moments when we are kept safe from danger, even when we have no idea we were ever in harm's way. Think of the times when you've narrowly escaped an accident, or the situations that could have gone terribly wrong but somehow turned out just fine. In these moments, we often don't realize that God's angels are intervening on our behalf, working behind the scenes to shield us from harm. This protection can also manifest in more subtle ways, like a sudden change in circumstances that leads us to a safer place. Perhaps you were planning to meet someone or go somewhere, and at the last moment plans changed. Something as simple as a phone call or a decision to wait, only to later realize that it was God's guidance redirecting you from a potential danger. Many times, divine protection comes in the form of prevention, keeping us from situations that could have harmed us physically, emotionally, or spiritually. But even when things do go wrong, God's protection doesn't abandon us. Instead, it may show up in the way we are able to recover or find the strength to move forward, even when we thought we couldn't. It's in these moments of weakness that we often feel the strength of God's angels lifting us up, carrying us through the storm. We should never underestimate the power of God's protection. We often hear stories of near-death experiences or miraculous survival stories that seem almost impossible. These stories serve as reminders that God's angels are real, and they are working in ways we can't always see or understand. It's not just a matter of avoiding physical harm. It's about God protecting us from emotional and spiritual dangers as well. Sometimes the protection comes in the form of guarding our hearts from bitterness, hatred, or despair. At other times, it is about guarding our minds from false beliefs or harmful thoughts. There are also times when God's protection goes beyond mere avoidance of danger. It involves a divine covering over our lives, providing us with the strength to endure trials, comfort in the midst of grief, and hope in times of despair. This form of protection can't always be explained, but when we look back on our lives, we can often see the moments when God was working behind the scenes, shielding us from the impact of what could have been devastating. While we may not always recognize the protection in the moment, when we reflect on our lives, we begin to see the patterns. The times when we should have been hurt but weren't. The times when things could have fallen apart but somehow didn't. These moments are not just mere coincidence. They are the unmistakable signs that God's angels are near, guarding us with love and care. There is a sacred peace that comes from knowing that God's protection surrounds us, even when we don't understand it. In the most unexpected places, in the most unpredictable moments, His angels are working to keep us safe. And though we may never fully comprehend the extent of their efforts, we can trust that God's protection will always be there, just when we need it most. In a world filled with uncertainty, chaos, and constant change, there is one thing we can always count on: the peace that comes from knowing God is near. This peace, often described as unexplained peace, is a divine gift that we experience during times of trial, struggle, and confusion. It's a peace that surpasses all understanding, a calm in the midst of a storm, and a sign that God's angels are present, offering comfort and protection when we need it most. Have you ever found yourself in the midst of a difficult situation, perhaps dealing with loss, facing a major life change, or struggling with personal challenges, and suddenly you felt a sense of peace wash over you? It wasn't because your circumstances had changed, but rather it was an inner calm that you couldn't explain. Even in the darkest moments, when everything seemed to be falling apart, you felt a quiet assurance that everything would be okay. This is the peace that comes from God, a peace that assures us we are never truly alone, no matter how isolated or overwhelmed we might feel. This unexplained peace doesn't come from the external circumstances around us. It doesn't come from having everything figured out or from solving all of life's problems. Rather, it is a peace that is rooted in the presence of God Himself. When we place our trust in Him, when we surrender our worries and fears into His hands, He sends His peace to fill our hearts and minds. It's a peace that is not of this world, a peace that can only come from Him. There are times when we face storms that seem impossible to weather, whether it's the loss of a loved one, the fear of an uncertain future, or the pain of a broken relationship. The natural response is often fear, anxiety, and distress. However, in these moments, God's peace is able to break through. It doesn't make sense to the world, but it is very real, and it changes everything. Suddenly, in the midst of grief or trial, we find ourselves with a deep sense of calm, knowing that God is with us. His presence becomes the anchor that steadies us when everything else is shifting around us. This peace is a reminder that God is working behind the scenes, even when we can't see it. It's easy to become overwhelmed by the circumstances of life, to feel like we are drowning in our struggles. But when we experience this peace, it's as if a veil is lifted and we see the bigger picture. God is in control, and He is holding us in the palm of His hand. No matter what we face, we can rest in the assurance that He is present, that His angels are near, and that He is guiding us through the storm. The peace of God is not just a feeling, it's a sign of His presence. When we feel this peace, it's as if His angels are surrounding us, providing a sense of comfort and security that we cannot find anywhere else. It's in these moments that we realize we are not walking through life alone. God is with us, and His angels are working on our behalf, offering protection, guidance, and strength. This peace also serves as a reminder to trust in God's timing. When we experience this peace, we are reminded that we don't need to have all the answers. We don't need to know what the future holds. What matters is that we trust in God's perfect plan for our lives. He knows what we need, and He will provide it at the right time. The peace we feel in these moments is a sign that God is orchestrating everything according to His will, and we can rest in the knowledge that He is working all things together for our good. As we go through life, we may face many challenges and hardships, but the peace of God is always available to us. It is a gift that we can receive in any circumstance, and it is a sign that angels are near. This peace is not something that can be manufactured or forced. It is a gift from God that comes when we open our hearts to Him. It is a reminder that we don't need to carry the weight of the world on our own, but that we can cast our cares upon Him, knowing that He cares for us. When we experience this peace, we are also reminded that it is a peace that we are called to share with others. As we receive the comfort and peace of God in our own lives, we are called to extend that same peace to those around us. In a world that is filled with fear and anxiety, we have the opportunity to be vessels of God's peace, bringing comfort to others who are struggling. Just as we have received this divine peace, we are called to pass it on, becoming instruments of healing and hope in a world that desperately needs it. This peace, this calm amidst the storm, is a powerful sign that angels are near. It is a tangible reminder that God is watching over us, protecting us, and filling us with His peace, no matter what we face. When we experience this peace, we are reminded that we are never alone, that we are always in His hands, and that we can trust Him with every detail of our lives. There are times in life when we feel lost, unsure of which direction to take. We stand at crossroads, torn between choices, weighed down by doubt. In those moments of uncertainty, God's divine guidance often becomes our beacon, pointing us toward the right path, even when the way forward is unclear. This guidance, often subtle yet unmistakable, is one of the most powerful signs that God's angels are near. Have you ever experienced a moment when, despite the confusion and chaos around you, you suddenly felt a sense of clarity, as though you were being led toward a decision or an answer that seemed perfect for your situation? Perhaps it was a sense of conviction in your heart, or maybe it was a specific thought or message that came to you at just the right time. It wasn't just a random occurrence or your own intuition. It was divine guidance, a sign that God was pointing you in the right direction. This is the kind of guidance that transcends human understanding, a reminder that God is with us, leading us step by step. One of the most significant ways that God's guidance manifests is through the Holy Spirit. The Spirit whispers into our hearts, leading us with gentle nudges and impressions. Sometimes these nudges come as an undeniable sense of peace about a decision. At other times, it may be the opposite, an unsettled feeling or a sense of caution about a particular course of action. This internal guidance is not always loud or dramatic. Instead, it is often quiet and gentle, but unmistakably clear when we take the time to listen. When we are in tune with God's voice, we begin to recognize these moments of clarity as signs that angels are guiding us. There are also moments when God's guidance comes in the form of external signs, opportunities, people, or circumstances that align in a way that makes it clear which direction to take. Perhaps you've experienced a time when everything seemed to fall into place, as if the doors to your future were opening before you in a way that felt too perfect to be coincidental. You might have been offered a job at the right time, met someone who helped you in an unexpected way, or found yourself in a situation that seemed tailor-made to help you grow or achieve your goals. These are not mere coincidences. They are God's angels working behind the scenes, guiding you toward what is best for your life. Sometimes guidance comes through Scripture. As we read the Bible, certain verses may stand out, speaking directly to our hearts in a way that provides clarity and direction. You may find yourself reading a passage that offers comfort, strength, or a clear message about the decision you are facing. These moments are not just about understanding words on a page. They are about receiving divine insight, a glimpse into God's plan for your life. When we seek God's wisdom in His Word, He promises to direct our steps. Additionally, God often uses other people to offer guidance. Whether it's a trusted friend, a mentor, a pastor, or even a stranger, God can speak through others to help us find our way. Perhaps someone shares an encouraging word at just the right time, or maybe they offer advice that resonates deeply with your own heart. These encounters are not by chance, they are divine appointments. Moments where God is using someone to guide you in the right direction. Sometimes God's angels work through the people around us, bringing us the wisdom, encouragement, and counsel we need to move forward. Another powerful way that guidance manifests is through our circumstances. Sometimes God uses the events and situations of our lives to lead us in the right direction. This could be an unexpected opportunity or a closed door that forces us to reevaluate our plans. It may be a season of waiting where we are forced to pause and reflect before making a decision. God can guide us through both the open doors and the closed ones, showing us that even in times of delay or frustration, He is working on our behalf. His guidance may not always make sense in the moment, but as we look back, we often see that He was leading us in ways we couldn't have anticipated. The key to receiving God's guidance is to stay open and receptive. It requires us to quiet our minds and hearts, to listen for His voice, and to trust that He will show us the way. In a world full of noise and distractions, it's easy to miss the subtle ways in which God speaks to us. But when we make space for Him in our lives, when we seek His wisdom with humility and faith, we can be confident that He will lead us in the right direction. The journey of life can sometimes feel like walking in the dark, uncertain of where each step will take us. But when we trust in God's guidance, we are never truly lost. We are always being led by His hand, whether we realize it or not. God's angels are near, and they are guiding us, protecting us, and helping us navigate the path that He has set before us. All we need to do is trust Him, listen to His voice, and follow where He leads. There are moments in life when we feel completely alone, as though the weight of the world is on our shoulders and no one understands our pain. It's in these times of isolation that God's angels often appear in unexpected ways, offering us comfort and reminding us that we are never truly alone. This comfort can come through the form of angelic encounters, people, signs, or experiences that bring a sense of peace and reassurance during our darkest moments. You've probably heard stories of people encountering strangers at just the right time. People who seem to appear out of nowhere and offer exactly the help, wisdom, or comfort needed in a particular situation. It might be a kind word from a friend, or even a stranger who says something that resonates deeply with your heart, as though they were sent specifically to remind you that you are seen, heard, and cared for. These encounters are not mere coincidences. They are divine interventions, acts of God working through His angels to bring us comfort and encouragement when we need it most. Perhaps you've experienced something similar in your own life. You may have been going through a difficult time, feeling lost or overwhelmed, and suddenly someone appeared with an encouraging word, a listening ear, or a gesture of kindness that lifted your spirits. It may have seemed like just an ordinary interaction, but in that moment, you felt the presence of God, and you knew that you were being supported by forces beyond what you could see. These encounters serve as a reminder that angels are always near, working to bring us the comfort and strength we need in times of hardship. It's easy to overlook these moments when we're caught up in our struggles. We may be too focused on the pain, the fear, or the uncertainty to notice the signs of divine intervention that are happening around us. But when we pause and reflect, we often realize that God has been at work all along, sending people and circumstances into our lives at just the right time to provide the comfort we so desperately needed. These angelic encounters can come in many forms, whether through a friend who calls just when you need to talk, an unexpected act of kindness from a stranger, or a conversation that brings clarity and peace to your soul. What's truly remarkable is that these encounters don't always have to be with people we know. Sometimes they come in the form of strangers who, through their words or actions, become instruments of God's comfort. These individuals might not even realize the impact they're having, but their words or deeds are exactly what we need in that moment. It's as if they're angels in human form, sent by God to provide us with the reassurance we need to keep going. One of the most beautiful aspects of these angelic encounters is that they often happen when we least expect them. When we feel like we're walking through life alone, God sends His angels, whether in human form or in the form of other signs and messages, to remind us that He is with us. The moments when we feel at our lowest, when we feel like no one understands, are often the very moments when God's angels step in to provide us with comfort, hope, and encouragement. These encounters serve as a powerful reminder that we are never truly alone, and that God's presence is always with us, even in our most isolated moments. In addition to the human encounters we experience, there are also times when God's angels make their presence known through more subtle means. This might be through a sign, a symbol, a song, a verse of Scripture, or even a dream that speaks directly to our hearts and brings us peace. These signs are meant to remind us that God is always watching over us, that His angels are near, and that we are loved beyond measure. Sometimes the comfort we receive comes not in the form of a conversation or a physical touch, but through a quiet, reassuring moment that speaks to our hearts in a way words never could. Angelic encounters can also happen through our own hearts and minds. There are times when we are struggling with doubt, fear, or confusion, and suddenly we experience a deep sense of peace or clarity that we can't explain. This peace is not of our own making. It is the result of God's angels offering us comfort and strength, helping us find our way when we feel lost. It is a divine reassurance that we are not alone, that God is with us, and that His angels are walking beside us every step of the way. When we experience these angelic encounters, it's important to recognize them for what they are: signs of God's love and care. We may not always understand why these encounters happen or how they fit into God's bigger plan, but we can trust that they are part of His divine intervention in our lives. Through these encounters, God reminds us that we are not walking this journey alone. He has sent His angels to be with us, to comfort us, to guide us, and to help us find peace in the midst of our struggles. It's easy to feel like we're facing life's challenges on our own, especially during times of pain and hardship. But the truth is, God is always near. and He sends His angels to comfort us in ways that we may not always see. When we open our hearts to recognize these divine encounters, we begin to realize that we are never truly alone, that these revels of life are the natural occurrence to be learned. God's angels are always with us, offering comfort, hope, and love, even in our most difficult moments. There are times in life when we feel like everything is falling apart. We may face hardships that seem insurmountable, battles that appear impossible to win, and challenges that seem to have no end. In these moments, we often find ourselves crying out to God, wondering why things are so difficult, why our prayers seem unanswered, and why we are faced with obstacles that seem beyond our ability to handle. But even in these times of difficulty and pain, we are reminded that God is still with us, and His protection is at work, even when we can't see it. Sometimes His protection comes in the form of unanswered prayers, turning what we perceive as setbacks into blessings that bring us closer to Him. When we pray, we often ask God for specific things: healing, guidance, provision, or a solution to our problems. We expect that our prayers will be answered in the way we envision, with everything falling into place according to our desires. But what happens when God doesn't give us exactly what we ask for? It's easy to become frustrated, confused, and even discouraged when we don't receive the answers we expect. However, it's in these moments that we must trust that God's plan is greater than our own understanding, and that even unanswered prayers are part of His divine protection and perfect will for our lives. There are countless stories of people who prayed earnestly for something only to have their prayers go seemingly unanswered. Maybe they asked for a particular job, a relationship, or a healing that never came. But as time went on, they looked back and saw that God's decision to withhold what they had prayed for was actually an act of protection. The job they prayed for might have led them into a toxic work environment or away from their true purpose. The relationship they longed for might have ended in heartbreak or disappointment, and the healing they sought might have been unnecessary because God had something better in store for them, a different path that would lead them closer to their destiny. When God says no or not yet, it is not because He is indifferent to our needs or desires. It is because He is protecting us from something we cannot see. His answers are always guided by His infinite wisdom and His deep love for us. He knows what is best for us, even when we don't understand it. And while we may feel disappointed or discouraged in the moment, we can trust that God's protection is at work, redirecting our lives in a way that will ultimately lead to greater blessings. Sometimes the protection comes through the things that don't happen. For example, you may have faced a setback or an opportunity that seemed to slip through your fingers, and at the time it felt like a failure. But as time passes, you may realize that not getting that job, that relationship, or that promotion was a blessing in disguise. Perhaps it spared you from a difficult situation or led you to a better opportunity, one that you would not have seen if you had continued down the path you initially thought was right. God's protection often works in ways that we can't fully comprehend. When we face disappointment or unanswered prayers, it's important to remember that God is not withholding blessings from us out of punishment. He is protecting us from things that could harm us, redirecting us towards something better, and positioning us for a future that is greater than what we could have imagined. Our limited perspective can often cause us to see only what we want, but God's perspective is eternal and perfect. He knows what we need even when we don't. There are also times when God's protection through unanswered prayers comes in the form of personal growth. When we face challenges and difficulties, we often pray for an easy way out, for relief from our struggles. But God knows that our growth often comes through the process, through the struggles that refine us, strengthen us, and draw us closer to Him. In these moments, unanswered prayers become a means of deepening our faith, expanding our trust in God's goodness, and learning to rely on Him in ways we never would have without the challenges. Unanswered prayers can also serve as a reminder that God is preparing us for something greater. Sometimes we are not yet ready for the blessings we seek. There may be areas in our hearts, minds, or lives that need to be aligned with God's will before He can answer our prayers in the way we hope. During these seasons, it is important to trust that God is working on our behalf, even when we don't see immediate results. His timing is perfect, and when the time is right, He will open the doors that are meant for us in ways that are far beyond our expectations. It's also important to recognize that sometimes God answers our prayers in ways that are not as obvious. We may not always see the direct impact of our prayers, but God's answers are often woven into the fabric of our daily lives in subtle and unexpected ways. The protection we experience through unanswered prayers may come through a change in direction, a shift in circumstances, or the gradual unfolding of His plan for us. We may not fully understand the reasons behind it at the time, but as we look back, we often see how God's hand was guiding us, even in the midst of unanswered prayers. In these moments, it's crucial to rest in the assurance that God's protection is always at work, even when we can't see it. Trusting Him, even when our prayers seem unanswered, is an act of faith. We may not always understand His ways, but we can trust that He is good, that He loves us, and that He is always working for our good, even in the midst of our struggles and disappointments. And when we do, we will find that God's protection is not just in the prayers that are answered, but in the ones that are not. There are moments in life when we feel like everything is going wrong, when it seems like no matter what we do, nothing works out. These are the times when we are faced with difficulties that leave us questioning why things are happening the way they are. We may wonder why God is allowing certain challenges to come our way, why it feels like we are being tested in ways that seem unbearable. Yet in the midst of these trials, there is one thing that we can always rely on: God's unwavering love and the protection that comes from His angels. Sometimes God's protection manifests in the form of difficulties that force us to grow, change, and trust in Him more deeply. When life becomes overwhelming and we are faced with obstacles that seem insurmountable, it's easy to become discouraged. The natural response is often to question God's intentions. Why would He allow us to go through such pain or suffering? However, it's during these times that we are called to remember that God's ways are higher than our ways, and His plans are better than anything we can imagine. While we may not understand the reasons behind our struggles, we can trust that they are part of a bigger picture, one that is unfolding according to God's perfect will for our lives. His angels are near, working behind the scenes to protect us, guide us, and help us grow in ways that we may not immediately recognize. There are times when God allows difficulties into our lives because they serve a greater purpose. Sometimes the challenges we face are meant to refine us, to help us develop qualities like patience, resilience, and faith. In these moments, it's easy to lose sight of the bigger picture, to become consumed by the immediate pain and frustration. However, if we can shift our perspective and trust that God is using these circumstances to shape us, we can begin to see that His protection is at work, even in the midst of our trials. God's angels often work through these difficult situations, providing us with strength and encouragement when we need it most. They are with us during our struggles, offering us peace and comfort that transcends our understanding. In times of hardship, it may feel like God is distant, but in reality, He is closer than ever, and His angels are carrying us through the storm. Their presence is a reminder that we are not alone, even when it feels like we are. They are working to protect us from things we cannot see, guarding our hearts and minds as we navigate the challenges before us. When we face adversity, it's important to remember that God's protection doesn't always look like the absence of difficulty. Sometimes His protection comes in the form of trials that teach us valuable lessons. These lessons may not always be easy to accept, but they are necessary for our spiritual growth. It's through the hardships that we learn to rely on God's strength, to trust in His timing, and to understand that His plans are always for our good. Though we may not always understand why certain things happen, we can trust that God is using them to build our character and to draw us closer to Him. There is also a deep sense of peace that comes from knowing that God is in control, even when everything seems out of control. This peace is a gift that God gives us when we surrender our fears, worries, and doubts into His hands. In the midst of our struggles, His angels often bring us this peace, reminding us that we are not fighting these battles alone. God is with us, and His protection is always at work, even when we can't see it. This peace doesn't come from the absence of difficulties, but from the knowledge that God is with us through every trial, and that He will never leave us or forsake us. In these moments of trial, we may also experience divine intervention in ways that we don't always recognize at first. Sometimes God works through our circumstances, opening doors when we feel like they are shut, and making a way when it seems impossible. His angels often bring messages of hope and encouragement through subtle signs, gentle reminders, and quiet whispers that reassure us that everything will be okay. We may not always notice these signs in the moment, but as we reflect on our journey, we often realize that God was working all along, guiding us and protecting us every step of the way. The key to navigating life's challenges is to trust that God's protection is always present, even when we don't understand the reasons behind our struggles. His angels are with us, providing us with the strength and wisdom we need to endure, grow, and overcome. As we go through difficult seasons, we are reminded that we are not abandoned, but that God is actively involved in our lives, working to bring about His good purposes. The protection of God's angels is not always obvious, but it is always real. Their presence is a constant reminder that we are not alone, and that God's love for us is steadfast no matter what we face. Ultimately, the challenges we face are not meant to defeat us, but to help us grow in our faith and trust in God's plan. When we face difficulties, we can hold on to the truth that God is with us, that His angels are near, and that He is using every circumstance, no matter how painful or difficult, to bring about something good in our lives. Even in the darkest moments, when everything seems to be falling apart, God's protection is at work, guiding us, strengthening us, and leading us to a place of deeper trust and understanding of His love for us.